Richard Wagner was not the first, by any means, to enunciate anti-Semitism and try to drive a wedge between Germany and the Jews. Already the philosopher Fichte in 1793 had argued that Germany had a unique mission to humanity. It was superior to the Latins, superior to the Slavs, and it was a chosen race being crucified by the one enemy, the Jews. And Fichte argued that all Jewish heads should be cut off, and on them should be placed non-Jewish heads without a single Jewish idea in them. He wrote that in 1793, the year of the guillotine. And Fichte's ideas were reiterated by many others, particularly by philosophers. For example, by Jacob Fries in 1816, who argued that Germany should be freed from Jews. He pleaded for the destruction of Judaism and the annihilation of the Jewish people. There were riots in at least 40 cities, both in Germany and elsewhere, caused by anti-Semitism, the Hep riots in 1819. And there were numerous other anti-Semites within German cultural, political, philosophical life. They include Bruno Bauer, they include Karl Marx himself. They include converted Jews like Ludwig Börner, who argued for the annihilation of the Jewish people through mass conversion to Christianity. There were others as well, if you don't mind me exploring them. One was Karl Gutzkow, the dramatist, who wrote in the 1830s that Germany needed to be redeemed from Jews. The only way that that could come about would be by the self-annihilation of the Jewish people. He argued that Jews must die as Jews, that that Judaism must be destroyed, and was virulently anti-Semitic. And it is quite possible that Wagner's own conversion to anti-Semitism occurred when Karl Gutzkow went to Dresden, where Wagner was the court Kapellmeister. Gutzkow went there as the court dramatist in 1847. And it was almost certainly in the following year, 1848, that Wagner wrote his profoundly anti-Semitic pamphlet, Judaism in Music.
1850, I think. Yeah.
It was published in 1850, but Paul Laurence Rose, in a brilliant piece of detective work, has shown quite clearly, in my opinion, that it was actually written in 1848. In other words, it was one of the very first of Wagner's prose writings, and his new exploration of a profound political ideology, philosophical ideology, which then informed all of his subsequent operas.
What do you think of those Jews who love Wagner's music and detest Wagner?
It's very easy to see how Wagner's music can be loved. It's hypnotic, it's deeply emotional music. He designed it to, as it were, reach the innermost core of human beings, particularly men. It's very, very male music in certain ways, seductive. Nietzsche called it poison. Wagner himself understood that he was creating, from the Ring onwards, a new religion. With all of the ritual, the fascination, the initiation, and certainly the whole sequence of leitmotifs into which one is gradually intellectually initiated, all of that is a form of powerful substitute religion. It is a musical art form which is so strong that one can actually almost lose one's identity in it. One has to surrender to it. And there are many people, Jewish, non-Jewish, who do feel a sense of ecstasy and the overwhelming power and, as they see it, beauty of Wagner's music.
You've said that Wagner's music, or certainly his music dramas, were created expressly to achieve this particular purpose. His idea of what Germany should become, and then if the enemy has to be destroyed...
Oh, it's much more than an idea of what Germany must become. It's an idea ultimately of what the world must become. Because he argued that he was, for the first time since the advent of Christianity, he was restoring the lost unity of all the arts, which had been present in pagan Greek culture, but had been lost, and had been lost due to Judaism introducing self-consciousness, morality, ethics, and guilt, and due to Christianity having a subversive ethic of compassion rather than virile, powerful, conquering strength. Wagner understood that he was actually redeeming art, redeeming ultimately Europe, through enabling Germany to have an utterly new art form which would coalesce music and poetry in an absolutely sexual union. He understood music as woman, poetry as man, and that he was the first artist who understood how to fuse the two again in a complete unity. Wagner, in a sense, identified Jews and Judaism and the Jewish influence within Germany as the locus of evil. One unusual aspect of Wagner is that whereas other anti-Semites argued for the complete assimilation of the Jewish people, for Wagner, that was ultimately the greatest danger. And that is why, of the three Jewish characters in The Ring, Hagen is the most deadly and the most dangerous, because all three represent stereotyped Jews. One can demonstrate that in all sorts of ways. But Mime and Alberich are, as it were, completely racially, ethnically Jewish, whereas Hagen, the one who is responsible for murdering Siegfried through a stab in the back, is actually half German and half Jewish. In other words, he represents the assimilated Jew whose blood runs cold, who is loveless, isolated. For Wagner, the epitome of evil, because he belongs in neither community and represents the deepest racial threat to Germany. Perhaps we can talk now about the role of Jews in Wagner's life, because it was a very significant one. Now, Jakob Katz, in 1986, argued that Wagner's anti-Semitism is attributable to biographical factors in his life, that maybe animosity to certain Jews who had ill-treated him in some way. Now, there's almost no evidence for that at all. On the contrary, the overwhelming evidence is that Jews were Wagner's benefactors right the way through his life. It was Jewish ladies who gave him openings in England when he first came here, who gave him introductions to Jewish composers in Paris. Meyerbeer, the Jewish composer, was an incalculable help to Wagner throughout the 1840s, as were numerous other German musicians, financiers, and others. Without Jewish artists, conductors, supporters, the whole Wagnerian enterprise would have been weakened, and he owed an immense debt of gratitude to Jews. Did he express it? Until about 1846, yes, he did. And his letters to Meyerbeer are full of strong gratitude. And then his ideology changed, and from then on, he became fiercely contemptuous of Jews.
Well, it's not unusual for people who have received gifts and generosity to turn against their benefactors, is it?
No, that is true. And indeed there may have been... He always argued that one of the most appalling of human characteristics is envy. And of course he would like commonly to attribute envy to the Jewish people. In fact, there are grounds for suggesting that Wagner himself was consumed by envy, both of the success, of financial success of composers like Meyerbeer, and of their fame, and indeed of other aspects, perhaps, of Jewish life. Another important aspect of...
We oughtn't to leave that without saying something about Hermann Levy. who conducted the first performance of Parsifal.
He did indeed. Yes, he did indeed conduct the first performance, but Wagner exerted tremendous pressure on him to be baptized first. Fortunately, Hermann Levy managed to resist, but Wagner was really adamant that only a baptized Jew should conduct Parsifal, because he called it the last and holiest of all my works. He regarded it as a profoundly Christian work, but in his own version of Christianity, which I would argue is actually deeply, deeply pagan. Parsifal is in essence pagan content cloaked in Christian symbols. It is paganism in Christian disguise. A fairly thick disguise, but the paganism is absolutely there. The trappings are Christian: Good Friday, Easter Sunday, the chalice, the grail, the lance. But the significance is actually thoroughly pagan. Jesus is not Jewish. Jesus is Aryan. He is identical to Siegfried. He is identical to the sun god Apollo, and also has elements of the god Dionysus. Jesus, being Aryan, is free from Jewish blood. The Eucharist, the new form of Eucharist, which Wagner is promoting through Parsifal, is actually racial purity. He is teaching Germany how to rid itself of the taint of Jewish blood and to become purely Aryan for the first time, and essentially purely pagan for the first time. You must explore with someone the intimate links between Hitler and other leading Nazis and Bayreuth, because certainly from 1923 onwards, Hitler and other Nazi leaders, including Goebbels, would go every year to the Bayreuth Festival. They would attend the operas. They regarded it very much as putting themselves in touch with the spirit of the master. And in the intervening days between the operas, they would have high-powered discussions, and then normally they would go off for a week to a retreat, and often, particularly in the late 20s and early 30s, take high-level policy decisions. And this rejuvenating of their own political impetus by, as it were, drinking from the fountain of Wagner's thought at the time of the Bayreuth Festival was absolutely crucial. Goebbels' diaries, again and again, praise Wagner as the pioneer, the source of their inspiration. And in addition to that, the Wagner family in Bayreuth, particularly Winfried Wagner, was a constant source of encouragement, indeed financial support, and the Bayreuth societies as well were one way for Hitler to link into an elite, a cultural, intellectual elite, even a financial elite within Germany. Peter Haas, a contemporary thinker in America, wrote an interesting book called Morality After Auschwitz, in which he argued that what happened in Nazi Germany was that evil was transplanted from previous areas which had been defined as evil onto the Jew, as indeed Wagner had done. And as soon as you define the Jew as evil, anything which is against the Jew becomes good. In other words, you still have a complete system of morality. You can still be a loving father, a loving husband, and maintain some kind of ethic. But you have shifted your whole core of morality. You can still enjoy fine music, and it can lead to a kind of schizophrenia. In other words, you compartmentalize your life. Anything that is against the Jew becomes good, and you can still retain much of your love of what had previously been good, such as high culture. So that for those senior Nazis and camp commandants and others, I believe that they probably did not see a particular incongruity in having in listening to concerts at night and in murdering by day.